Hello, Woo Crew, and welcome back. It is January 15th, and we are so excited to be coming to you today with another episode on the Divine Feminine. We heard you loud and clear. We know that was one of our favorite episodes last year when we talked about the Divine Feminine and the Divine Masculine, and so we thought we'd go a little bit more in depth today. But first, as always, I would love if Ellie, you would read us a review.
This review comes from Nicole Yoga. Thanks, Nicole. The real talk on the woo that I've been waiting for. The day this first episode was released, I put it on while rearranging my home office. I got so lost in the moment and felt like I was part of the conversation. I love the authenticity these two share, and I can't wait to listen to more. Thanks, Nicole, for the review.
Thank you. We love that comment of feeling like you're in the room with us. We have gotten that from a few people, and that's really the whole point. It's that feeling of sitting in circle in community with women, shooting the shit. And if that's something that you like about this podcast, then you definitely want to come on over to Patreon and join us over there because there is so much of that. Next week is our second Witches Corner as you're listening to this on the 24th. And that's our sit down, ask us all your questions. Let's chat. Let's be in each other's presence and company and community. So come on over. The water's warm.
The water is warm. The water is definitely warm.
What magical thing or magical moment would you like to speak about? We're recording this well in advance, which is very unusual for us. So, unlike the weeks where we say, what happened last week? This is kind of just a magical moment we'd like to presence as we are prepared. How do we do that?
How? So, a magical moment that I want to presence. Hang on. Here we have a throat chakra issue going on right now.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So the magical moment that I would like to presence is I keep coming back to the crispness of the weather, like of nature itself, and how in tune we are with nature in the cycle when we strip away everything that we no longer need, like the 9 to 5. I mean, we need these things, but when we strip it back to the basics, the most wonderful thing is being in tune with what it is that is going on outside. And so how I've been living into this season is acknowledging whenever I wake up and I look out the window and I see either the sun shining, especially here on the West Coast, that is a rare occurrence, or it's overcast or whatever else is going on. We've had a little bit of snow, we've had a little bit of rain, and allowing for the moodiness of the environment and the nature that I am surrounded by to determine the tasks that I do for that day. And I think that living in alignment with nature and living in alignment with ourselves, and we're going to talk about the divine feminine today, all of this comes down to understanding that we can really be in tune with nature. And that starts to, when we live in that way, that starts to really make us feel like instead of we're pushing against things, that we're actually living quite literally in alignment. And so the way that I dress, like, is this coziness today? You know, the privilege of living out on the West Coast is that you might still be wearing your sandals in this exact moment. Your Birks might still be on, or you might be able to dig them out from underneath the shoe rack because you haven't put them away for the year. Or is it that I want to wear a cozy sweater? Is it that I want to think how I want to eat? Do I want to be eating like warm and delicious soup or porridges or congees or any of those things? Or is this like a grill day? A little side note is that I really love grilling things and smoking things and all types of cooking on fire. So my magical moment is really just feeling into what is going on in nature and allowing that to dictate how I plan my day. Now, I also want to note in this moment that that doesn't mean because we're in rainy season, that doesn't mean that every day is a depressive day, because I do understand that there's sun over and above that rain that is falling. But it does allow me to say, okay, I still have to walk the dogs today. I still want to be out of nature. How am I going to make the most of what's happening here? And that feels really magical to me instead of fighting against it, which a lot of my life I had fought against the weather. Here we are talking
Mhm.
about the weather, but I've fought against the weather.
Mhm. Yeah, I resonate with that in a big way. I think that it's this space for me in Calgary. It's so funny because it hasn't actually been that cold out. And yet, as soon as the kind of winter drearies, the problem here is that when it's not that cold out, everything's still brown. And so if there isn't a layer of snow, it's just kind of blah.
Mhm.
Though on the flip side, the sun shines, but there is this weird, like, I'm like, oh, it's too cold to go outside. And then I go out and I'm like, actually, it's quite warm.
Oh, I
Don't
love a
know.
crisp.
Yeah, it hasn't even been very crisp very often, but it is this sense of trying to balance the like it's fine to be inside and cozy and warm, but also with that getting out into fresh air, into nature. I've started doing saying my morning prayer on my back deck thing. I think I said that in another episode where I'll step out my back door into it's a covered porch. It's tiny, but it's not insulated. It's just kind of tacked onto the back of the house. And even just that little bit of shift, a little bit closer to the light, if the light's up, if the sun's up, and just into the air that is not heated by my furnace has been really helpful to kind of, yeah, connect with those rhythms.
I love
I
that.
think the magical moment that I'd like to presence for this episode was really an afternoon. I had the really great privilege of holding a full afternoon ceremony for a client. It was just the two of us, and it was from 1 p.m. until we wrapped up around 6:30 p.m. And it was so, I remember going into it feeling a bit like, okay, this is the first time I'm holding a long ceremony and for just one person and feeling a bit unsure and hopeful that I'd be delivering, a really good experience for her. And it was so lovely. It was so lovely to be able to
Mm.
sit together to let the layers kind of peel back. We pulled cards, we talked, we danced, we did all sorts of stuff. And it was really, truly lovely and magical. So if she's listening, if you're listening, thank you. I'm obviously not going to name you, but it's a real honor and pleasure. It was a magical highlight for sure of my week.
Oh, lovely.
Mhm. Shall we dive into today's topic?
Let's. Living into the divine feminine. The divine feminine, if you've not listened to episode 3 on the divine feminine, go back, pause this, go back, listen to that. And that's going to give you a foundation of what the divine feminine and masculine are. And today we really want to talk about how we use these principles in our everyday life to live more fully in the divine feminine, first of all. And I think that this starts to reveal the benefits of living in the divine feminine. Like, why? Who cares? Why? Why is that important?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
inner child in me is like, I don't care about this. And so my higher self is always coming out and saying, okay, sweet child, this is why this is important. And so we
Yeah.
want to talk about 3 main things, just daily rituals and how we incorporate the divine feminine into our daily rituals. Sacred time and space, how we create sacred time and space, especially whenever we are in a 9 to 5. Most often we're in other people's schedules. We have, some of you have children and or soccer practice and dance class and other engagements that you do for yourself as well. So how we create sacred time and space there. And then creating family rituals and ceremony that bring the sacred back into what it is that we're celebrating.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
let's begin.
Let's begin. Let's begin at the beginning.
Yes.
Daily rituals. And at the very beginning of that is morning practices. Sometimes you'll hear, morning routine, morning ritual, sacred start. Do you want to drop in with how you start your morning practice or what that piece holds for you first?
hmm I think that this can encompass a lot of things. We talked a little bit on a previous episode on what sort of our daily routines look like and how they come into play. But specifically, morning practice for me is setting some intentions for the day and actually like playing them out. So what I mean by this is that my intention setting for today is all around doing some journaling in the morning. So how we can set this up is by carving out a piece of time in our life in the morning is really best because this sets the intention for the rest of the day.
Mhm.
And for me, it includes journaling, meditation, card pulling, consulting and speaking with the goddess for that matter, and the practices that I use in my everyday. So this might be going to my altar and creating some sort of, I usually stay away from the term spell and more lean on the term intention setting. So, but just have a ritual where candles are
Mhm.
lit, essential oils are put on, and how I choose those things and how they come together all is based upon the intention that I've set. Now I have I have my inner child right now speaking, and she's saying things like she's got her hands on her hips and she's very much like, well, who has time for this? And I really cannot stress enough, especially like this started for me whenever I began practicing yoga. This was something that my morning practice was movement and was meditation and mindfulness at that point in time. And I always come back to this quote in yoga that is, if you don't have time, you're going to take more time for yoga. Like yoga creates
Mm.
space.
Mhm.
Yoga creates time.
Mhm.
And I know that my life is different on the days that I've skipped my morning practice because the intention is no longer set and it feels chaotic.
Yeah.
And so, you know, to soothe my inner child or that abrasiveness sometimes that is like, well, you know, we work and I've got a schedule. I've got four dogs. I've got, you know, a partner who works super early in the morning. You know, my life is full. My life is full. When do I have time for something like this? And the answer really is I don't have time to not do it.
Mhm.
This is so important in my life to be able to set the foundation for what's to come for my day. And it often looks like, as we've talked about in previous episodes, this journaling, meditation, consultation, and being at my altar.
Mhm.
Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about you.
Yeah. Yeah. What I hear you say throughout that is really that tapping into the divine feminine energy with that morning ritual. And I feel like it's similar for me. I have my morning ritual has been really all over the place since Minka left. For some reason, I thought it would be easier to do some of the things I had been wanting to weave back in, like to write earlier in the day because she wouldn't be wanting me to sit with her on my lap, or to meditate without the interruption of her, pawing at me or being like, I don't like this position. Why are you sitting like this? And the opposite has been quite true for me. It's just this, I feel a bit untethered. And so I'm working to find and recreate that and reprioritize that. But the piece that brings me back, and this is what I've done for myself in this past week, being like, okay, well, everything else has kind of been tough. And it is a hard month as far as being really full. I definitely went through some rocky, like business feeling, like stressy bits. If you're on my email list, I ended up in the hospital in December because of a headache. I was stressed. The irony not lost on me. And so I really, in the last couple of weeks since that happened, have reprioritized just saying my morning prayer. If nothing else happens, if I come downstairs and I end up on Instagram and I drink coffee before I eat and I don't move my body, if all of that is gone to shit and the day feels kind of unrooted from that, if I can just take the 2 minutes to say my morning prayer, it really does make a difference. And for me, that is really tapping in to those divine feminine principles of harmlessness and compassion and rooting in to that. I shared over on the Patreon, that was part of what we talked about on our first Witches Corner. And I shared my morning prayer specifically and how I go about crafting it. And so if that's something you're curious about or wanting to sink deeper into, that's over there for any of you who are wanting to go a little deeper into the morning rituals. But I do think it is this really the key piece. If only the first 10 minutes of your day are rooted in the divine feminine, at least the first 10 minutes of your day are.
And to come back to the Patreon for just a moment, Eileen and I speak about our full practices there that you can get on the Patreon. But I think that coming into the energy of the divine feminine, like for a lot of us, what happens is that we kind of go in and out. This happens for everybody at all times. We move in and out. We live in a world of masculine energy and of like testosterone 24-hour periods and 7 days a week and 30-ish month days, or day months. And we live in a world that takes us out of our divine feminine. If we set our intentions to move into that, like Eileen said, even for the first 10 minutes of your day, like this is a success. And I think usually what starts to happen is that we get this rub. This is my inner child saying like, well, who has time for that? We have this rub that once we start to, conceptualize that this would be really good for us, the practice is something that's completely different. It's the same as yoga, the practice of yoga and watching yoga or, looking at a schedule or to do two completely different things.
Thinking about yoga.
Yeah. Hilarious. The practice of the divine feminine, living into the divine feminine, is a different entity altogether, because this is something that actually takes effort for us to do. There's no effort for everyone's daily routine that we have been conditioned for our lifetime to wake up, drink your coffee, throw some food in your face, head out the door, always be rushed, always, rush home, make dinner, watch TV, go to bed. Where's the magic in that? And the divine feminine is all about bringing back the magic to our life. It's so important. And so if you find yourself with that rub, because often what happens is that we might feel resentful, or we might feel a moment in time where we don't know how we're going to fit this in. It is something that it's a different kind of effort now. It's a different effort to put it into our daily practice.
And it's not necessarily comfortable effort too, because it is, I had a post come out this week as we're recording it about how rest feels shitty to a nervous system that's used to constant productivity. Like it doesn't feel good. And so the divine feminine is a lot about pausing and being present and resting or being receptive. And if your nervous system is used to constantly pushing and going, it doesn't necessarily feel good as you start to do it. Even for those of us who've practiced for a long time, that's the struggle of getting back out of the ruts. It's like you think about the old roads, like for a wagon, they weren't paved. And so the wagon wheels would get deeper and deeper and deeper. And pretty soon it's really hard to get out of those ruts. And if you do get out, it's really easy to fall back in. And they're still pretty deep, maybe less deep because you haven't been rolling over them for quite as long, but they're still there. And there's still these really comfortable quotations, grooves of routine and habit and ways of responding and being. And so being gentle with yourself, again, compassionate self-inquiry and curiosity and just generally, that harmlessness and compassion turned on yourself as much as everybody else if you're trying to start embodying more of those divine feminine principles.
You're reminding me just before we hit record for this, and I came into the office, my love said, oh, well, if you're going to work, I'm going to work. If you're going to work, they're off today. And I said, it is, we were recording this on a Monday. It is the Monday of a long weekend for you. There's no need to go to work right now. There's no need to jump up. But because we're so conditioned, also hardy har there, Capricorn. So no, in Capricorn season currently. And so, our nervous system is tuned to be like, oh, if you're doing something, I have to do something, because we can't, society tells us that we can't be in practice while our lover or partner or husband or wife and children are off getting ready for their day at work and school or whatever, for their day, period. That we are selfish and we are, not caring for our family because we're not present with them. And the presence that we have in morning practice, I'm like, I am on my high horse right now. I am like I'm chopping the patriarchy with my hand right here. This presence that we give ourselves through morning practice literally sets ourselves up. And that's what I want to stress so much in this episode is just how it's okay, how this is your permission slip to be different from your partner and your children, to be autonomous, and yet still be a leader or matriarch or whatever in your family. And nurturing yourself needs to be a top priority. And as cliched as we say in the yoga world, you can't pour from an empty cup. And whatever fills your cup is going to actually enhance your family in the future, in the future moments, if you're taking this 10 to 30 to an hour for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
As
Mm-hmm.
projectors, we also have something that like we just need 8 hours in the morning before we can start our day.
Yeah. Please and thank you. And then 2 hours of work, and then I'm done.
Done for the day.
That's it. That's all. That's all I got. It's so funny. As you were saying that too, yeah, that sense of also, I think one of the really important pieces of the divine feminine, that passing on of wisdom, right? We think about the crone, the elder, the wise woman, and part of that passing on, part of that wisdom is modeling what it is to be balanced and in your divine feminine as a woman for our children, for our men as well, and our like the other women around us, for everybody, so that we don't just reinforce the cycle that we're all caught in and stuck in and trying to heal. In order to heal it, in order to shift it, it's going to have to be shown by individuals and communities, obviously, that ripple effect outwards.
I want to add to this because you're just reminding me of something. The more that we're in our divine feminine, the more that our partners can be in their divine masculine, or whoever it is. We talked before in our previous episode that we don't have to be in a male and female body to embody this divine masculine feminine. And as someone who often, as the, in quotations, head of the household, there are certain things that I repetitively do. I'm going to say like I'm hesitating to use the words like I'm responsible for. And we have pink and blue. I can barely get this out of my mouth without like
Vomiting.
the rolling of my eyes and like the wanting to spit up my teeth.
The gagging.
Gosh. Yeah. We have certain things that we repetitively do without them necessarily being roles. And I was telling Eileen when we recorded a couple of episodes ago that it was in the evening and my love had come home and started cooking dinner. And I said, we've been together for 2.5 years. I can count on one hand. There's been once that they've cooked a meal. Because when it's their turn, in quotations, or they're responsible to cook a meal, their answer is to go out for dinner. They would much rather, and I love cooking, they would much rather go out for dinner because they're not a super fan of cooking. And it's not that they can't cook, because they do cook.
Mm-hmm.
And they've cooked. And I mean, sometimes they make breakfast. I take back, they've cooked dinner once. They've cooked breakfast many a time, just so that we're clear on what this is. And I came downstairs and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, this is just really strange. Like, I'm having a hard time removing myself from the kitchen because I want dinner to be cooked. Like, I marinated the meat and I want it to be cooked a certain way. Here is both my A type and my masculine coming in. I wanted it to be done a certain way. And I have to leave the kitchen because they're taking the responsibility for that in this moment. And I have to hand it over to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then, usually we walk pups together, and they went and took the pups out as we were recording. And I finished the recording and hopped upstairs thinking that we were going to go for a walk. And they said, no, everyone's walked. Everyone's gone to the washroom. We're just going to hang out. Like, if you want to go for a walk by yourself, you can, or take a dog with you. So please, if you want to have a bath. And I literally was like, wow, because we have a routine, my responsibilities in the evening have completely changed, and I just get to do what I want.
So nice. And so hard. So hard. I find myself very much, I struggle to, allow Greg to do things for me. Even the little things like carrying the groceries. I'm like, I can carry the groceries myself. Okay, but do you need to? Like, if he wants to offer. okay, I'm starting to soften and to let that kind of thing happen. He will often tell me to like sit down and the dishes are his because I do most of the cooking in the evenings. And it is not comfortable. I tend to have to kind of leave the vicinity to be able to allow that to happen because yeah, my knee-jerk reaction is to get up and help the moment he's doing something.
And it's interesting that you say this because, my partner has a certain way that they do things. And so they clean in a certain way. And it's okay for me not to clean like they clean. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
and vice
take it up
versa.
from the table and they immediately start cleaning. Like
Hmm.
my fork isn't even out of my mouth and they're already cleaning. And I want to lounge for a second after my meal. This is the difference
Right.
between a projector and a Manny Gen, everybody. I do
Yeah.
not have that sacral energy. And I want to enjoy, I want to chit chat after. And so we'll chit chat while they're cleaning, but I have to remember that the expectation of me to do things exactly like they do things is my expectation that I've put on me. It's not
Hmm.
their expectation.
Hmm.
And I think that these are really good, practical, like juicy little tidbits on how we struggle with the divine feminine, incorporating that in our life because we are flexible
Hmm.
in how we do things and we're flexible with the roles that we play, even if we're in a relationship that is a heteronormative relationship,
Yeah,
there's still that little bit of passing back and forth and how we move through this. So these are good examples.
for sure. I think that was a really great. We had the note to make sure we're talking about why it's easier said than done. And I feel like this has really kind of touched on that in a big way. So that's perfect. Let's talk a little bit about sacred time and space and calling in the divine feminine in this
Mm-hmm.
way.
Mm-hmm. Some things that I have here to like encompass sacred time and space. Well, first of all, I think that our sacred time and space really begins in morning practice, but we
Yes.
also have other intervals of sacred time and space. And we just touched on this, especially with you talking about your partner and helping you out, and me saying that like I could just go for a walk that day, like I could do whatever I wanted.
Hmm.
For the divine feminine, as we embody the divine feminine, really what this is nurturing ourselves. Like we're constantly nurturing others, but how do we also nurture ourselves? And so I have things like solo adventures or solo practices that we do by ourselves, for example. And I'll give a few concrete examples of this: community practices, gathering in community and being with other women or being with other people in the divine feminine is a really nurturing thing to allow for our divine feminine to be expressed.
Hmm.
There is this push and pull that happens as we are supported and supportive in community. And I think this is really important as we move through our practice, and especially as witches, as priestesses, as woo curious individuals. This is really important to flex. Oh, what a term to use with the divine, but to embody, there we go, our divine feminine, period.
Hmm. Yeah, I really love it. Was interesting as you were speaking, I was thinking about solo adventures and practices and how this kind of comes back to that nervous system feeling shitty when it's not in production mode. I find it much easier to sit in my divine feminine in community than I do alone because alone, well, I should be doing something.
Mm.
It was
Mm.
interesting. I was like, oh yeah, it's hard for me. And it's harder for me since starting a business and having a lot more on my plate. It's very interesting to think about the shift between as a midwife, I worked crazy hours and I worked a lot, but they were kind of when I wasn't working, I was really not working. It was like I was on or I was off. And that experience has shifted with moving into an entrepreneurial world. You really have to decide when you're off. And that's, I think, a really hard balance to find for a lot of us. And so even just going for a walk in the wildlands behind my house, there is that kind of urge to be like, okay, well, I could make some content while I'm out here. I'll take some pictures, I'll take a video. And so I'll often go for those walks without my phone in order to force myself into that solo time. And I notice myself getting bored, which is not something that I would necessarily have felt before I shifted kind of how I'm operating day to day. And so it's a really good reminder of in this space, in this path of walking as a healer, as a guide, which is very much a divine feminine energy, remembering to cocoon myself in that energy and not just offer it to others is really important.
I think this is interesting. The discussion that I had with my partner yesterday actually was that we were on two different schedules.
Mhm.
And again, this plays into the Manny Gen and projector roles in the household, but understanding that I have I have a defined amount of time for undefined tasks or whatever it is that I want to do. And that there are moments where there are bursts of energy or times where we work, as you just spoke to your experience as somebody who worked, either you were completely on or you were completely off, and as somebody who worked a 9 to 5 and then sometimes also worked a 5 to 9,
Mm.
that it was, we can still be working in our divine feminine. We can still be leaning back in our divine feminine. We can
Mhm.
still be in community and out and engaging and working or socializing in our divine feminine. It's just a matter of understanding that this is a archetype where we are leaning back into our intuition. We're leaning back into our nurturing archetypes. We're leaning back and we're also leaning forward, for that matter, into things like our wild woman archetype or something called the primal goddess. It's less about the things that we're doing and more about the archetype that we're really living into as the divine feminine.
Yeah, that sense of what we are embodying.
Exactly. So one last point about this is just that I want to stress how important community gatherings are. And this is why you and I both do community gatherings. We have both free offerings and paid offerings that gather the community both in person and online, because we know when women get into a room that very powerful things happen.
Oh, such powerful things. Yeah,
And we
and it
have,
is. Oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Deep remembrance, excuse me, deep remembrance around the way that we live into the divine feminine, connect with it.
Yeah, yeah. When I first started holding ceremony for the Wheel of the Year, I remember feeling really awkward about the gravity of it almost. There is, I often say it's sacred, not serious, and there is levity to it as well. But there was this sense of like, is this gonna like weird people out? And it's been the opposite. People have kept coming back. They bring friends. There's like a core group of people who don't miss any of them. And it is this real sense of like, this is what we're missing. This ritual, this connection, and this ability to feel safe with other women. I think I've been really lucky in having spaces like that for quite some time now. And so I almost take it for granted. But one of my friends who comes to my ceremonies has recently voiced that she's really comfortable holding space for others, but she's not ever been very comfortable having space held as she speaking her own truths or her own kind of inner thoughts and struggles and stuff. And so that's been really precious to grow and build that. And I love that we are now offering space together as well to have that kind of safe, seen, held, heard, sacred circle with women. Bring all your questions, all of yourself. It's all welcome.
And I want to be explicit about something that you touched on is the difference between holding space and taking up space are two completely different things. And like you said, they're two completely different attunements in our nervous system. That it comes quite natural to some to hold space for others, to be that caring and that nurturing. And in that same breath, it becomes really difficult to take up space because we have to trust that we will be held. We know that we can hold other people, but we have to trust that we will be held, and being held means letting go of the reins, relinquishing control, allowing your partner to cook the chicken however they want to cook the chicken. Even though you
Surrender.
spent so much effort on the
The
marinade.
marinade. It is. Surrender is vulnerable. It is
Yes.
so vulnerable, and we are so not used to doing it. So yeah, it's powerful for sure.
Find yourself some women's circles to be a part of, or join us in ceremony. Like really have this experience for yourself. Really, really have this experience for yourself.
Yeah.
Let's talk
Let's
about family rituals and ceremony.
Yeah, let's do it. So this is another really beautiful way to weave the divine feminine into your daily life and start to weave your family into the practice of it as well. Because again, we've touched on the point, it doesn't matter what biological sex you are. Each of us holds and embodies both the divine masculine and divine feminine. And the reason we focus so much on the divine feminine is because it's really been lost and deprioritized by our culture, but having ways to weave it back into those like major celebrations, birthdays, holidays. We talk about Wheel of the Year or High Holy Days, and these actually line right up with a lot of the major holidays, Easter, Christmas, all of those ones. But creating a sense of ceremony or ritual, creating space for discussing the deeper meaning and the intention behind these kinds of moments and these passages of time, and bringing that divine feminine essence again, harmlessness, compassion, leaning back, receiving, intuition, and that presence and softness in the moment.
I want to add here that you, as the individual who is embodying the divine feminine, whoever that is in the household, bringing your family along with you for these rituals and practices, like for the ceremony of how you want to spend your birthday, and adding more magic or more mystery or more the ethereal into the practices that we have. The more that you do that, the less weird it becomes. The more
Yeah.
normal we make this, the less weird it becomes. And I think this is part of the mission as Woo Curious, is that we're really speaking to things that have been kept in the closet. They've been kept, we've whispered them instead of spoken with confidence about them. And I think the more that you can bring your family into this, that has generational impact. And
Mm-hmm.
that generational impact is going to change for the future generations what and how we live our life, not as much in toxic masculinity or in that side of things. So
Mm-hmm.
we really are making what might seem the weird or the mystical or the magical absolutely normal and everyday. There's still that magical element to things. Of course, there's still that magical element to things.
Mm-hmm.
But if, birthday bumps are not your jam, I've never had the birthday bumps before. Okay.
Neither have I.
No, but
No,
I know
thank you.
people do this. Or speaking to as we exit the holidays, if, you know, heavy drinking of alcohol is not your jam and it's not your jam anymore, then you get to voice that. Like it may have been your deal at some point, but you get to voice that. And how are you leaning into or leaning back for the rituals and ceremony for how you want to celebrate and how you want to be celebrated? I think
Mm-hmm.
the biggest thing with the divine feminine is the secrecy around it. And I don't mean that it is a secret. It's that we are still sometimes tiptoeing around it.
Mm-hmm.
And when we fully embody it, Melanie Ann Lair calls this magic on legs. We just become absolute magic on legs whenever we are embodied in this state. So
Mhm. It's a lot more comfortable for a lot of us to be in our divine masculine or in our masculine aspects. And so it is that sense of, yeah, tiptoeing around it, trying it on, but feeling a little bit uncomfortable because it is new or not practiced for so many of us. And yeah, having that ability to weave it in. This reminds me of, as we talk about ceremony and, what are we practicing with our families? What legacy are we leaving in If Women Rose Rooted? She talks about becoming elder. And
mm,
you can become elder at any point in your life, but thinking about what kind of elder do you want to be and what kind of elder do you want your children to be, or, the next generation, what will they pass on? And if we don't start to shape and model what it is we hope for ourselves in the world, then they won't have anything to pass on either. So I think that's a big piece of this. Again, that cycles, the archetypes of womanhood, maiden, mother, crone, elder, right? That deep wisdom and heart of community that exists within the divine feminine.
You're reminding me of an experience that I had a couple of years ago. I had somebody come stay with me who I didn't know very well. They were moving out west, and I invited them to come stay with me for a little while they got on their feet out here. And in practice, let's say on Instagram, there was a definite witchy element to them. And when they came to my house, they were in awe of the tools that I had just around my house. Like if you walk into my living room, there are 4 sets of card decks on. 2 of them belong to me, 2 of them belong to my wife, like on my coffee table. There's crystals, and there's a raven candle, and there's all sorts of things that are witchy, and that those physical visual reminders also help me live into the divine feminine. And so one of the things she said to me, she's like, you have pendulums in almost every room in your house. Now, I lived in a 1-bedroom house, but there was a pendulum in the kitchen, in the living room, in the bedroom, and the bathroom. So in every room of the house. And there were tarot cards all over. And there was an altar set up both in my bedroom and in the main space. And I think that this has just become so normal for me, like for the last many years of living like this, that when they entered my home, and as somebody brand new sort of to my physical life, it was interesting for me to have the reflection that this is part of my everyday. Like I go to my parents' house, and the first thing I do is set up an altar on the dresser in the bedroom that I'm in. Like these are just visual parts of my life. And coming into the aspect of family rituals and ceremony, the more we can make this really magical and yet so mundane, it just makes things so much better. Even the conversations that we have at dinner time between, my partner and I, they include a magical aspect. And these are easy ways for you to incorporate them into your everyday life.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That space. So this was the first of 2 parts that we're going to do on this living into the divine feminine. We felt like there was just a little bit too much to keep it to 1 episode. And this episode's a little shorter than some weeks, but next week will be another dive again into a few more topics about living into your divine feminine. Once you've listened to both, we'd love to hear if there's anything else. I feel like this topic is one worth revisiting over and over. And as Ellie mentioned earlier in the episode, if you haven't yet listened to I think it's episode 3 on the sacred feminine and masculine, and how those 2 archetypes show up in the world, then we definitely recommend you go back and listen.
Thanks so much for listening this week, Woo Crew. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.